Good morning. Welcome to today's hearing. My name is Councillor Anthony Kelly. I will be chairing today's meeting. My council colleagues are Councillor Cordeer and Councillor Gallant. We comprise today's subcommittee. We also joined by Cornelia Harden, who is clerk to the subcommittee and will be minuting the meeting, and Hatun Zeb, who is the legal advisor to the subcommittee. And we have Angelique Garcher, senior licensing processing team leader, who will introduce the report. In accordance with procedure, I will invite the licensing officer to introduce the report, provide clarification on factual issues, invite the applicant to present the application, answer any questions and call any witnesses. Then invite those who have made representations and objections to make them, answer any questions and call upon any witnesses. At the conclusion of the hearing, the subcommittee, accompanied by the legal advisor and the committee democratic services officer, will retire to consider its decision. At that point, you'll be asked to leave the room, the virtual room. The decision will then be given at the end of the meeting, when you'll be able to return to the room, and will be confirmed within 5 working days. If the panel is unable to reach a decision today, you'll be notified in writing within 5 working days. Angela is going to introduce the report, and then I've got another note to say to you before we start proceedings. So if you'd like to go ahead, please, Ms. Garcher.
Thank you. Excuse me. So on the 20th of September 2021, Ealing Council Licensing Authority received 2 applications under the Licensing Act 2003 from the applicant, Mr. Carsten Ron, and these follow. So the first one was an application to transfer a premises license under Section 42 of the Licensing Act 2003 from the London Borough of Ealing Festival Events Team to the applicant. The second one was an application to vary a premises license to specify an individual as a designated premises supervisor under Section 37 of the Licensing Act 2003. If granted, the applications will make Mr. Carsten Rawn the premises holder and the DPS of the premises license for Walpole Park. The applications are related to the Oktoberfest event, which will take place at Walpole Park from the 28th to the 31st of October 2021. On the 1st of October 2021, the Chief Officer of the Metropolitan Police submitted a notice to Ealing Council Licensing Authority declaring their satisfaction that the exceptional circumstances of the case are such that granting each application would undermine the prevention of crime and disorder licensing objective. If there's anything else that you'd like me to clarify, please let me know.
That's fine. Thank you, Angeli. Just before I'll ask people to introduce themselves, but as a preliminary matter, we have on the 19th of October received evidence from the MPS to support their objection. We understand that all this evidence has been shared with the applicant, Mr. Carsten, yesterday at the same time it was sent to us. In considering the police request to introduce this evidence, we have been referred to the council's hearing procedure, the hearing regulations, and we have also considered the short period of time within which this process has had to take place. The applications were received on the 23rd of September, and it doesn't meet with the same consultation process required under a new premises license application. Therefore, we have accepted that it is in the public interest that the additional evidence submitted by the Metropolitan Police Service is considered to ensure that we have all the information before us to reach a decision. We have also received an email from Mr. Carson dated the 19th of October and have equally accepted these documents. We have noted that Mr. McComb has agreed to briefly address us on all the police evidence, and unless Mr. Carson specifically wants to question any of the evidence of the witnesses, we want you to note that we have read all the submitted evidence and will consider this when making our decisions on these applications at the end of the hearing. So just we could quickly go through the actors in the room just So for clarity, so we've got the councillors. So anybody who hasn't been introduced, Mr. Carson.
Yes, good day. Good day. My name is Carsten Ron, and I'm the organizer of Oktoberfest. I'm working as a director for Worldwide Festival, who is the company who runs the events. I've been working on this job in a way since 2009. So we're working all over Europe, and UK is one of our biggest markets, where we had nearly 300 of these events since 2011.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Police team.
I'm Charles McComb, counsel representing the Met in these proceedings.
Good morning, I'm PC Kerry Smart, Police Licensing Officer.
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair, good morning. Graham Edwards. I manage the ASB and licensing teams for the West Area BCU.
Borough control units. Fine. Okay. Yes. So to Mr. Carsten, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Should I just comment on the case now? Yeah.
Yeah. So, so obviously, just have you been at a licensing hearing before, Mr. Round?
Yeah, some years ago, but not like this.
Not virtually, yeah. So it has a different dynamic. I appreciate that. So yeah. So there'll be plenty of time for you to come back if there's things you get asked later on. So it's not a one speech chance. Yeah.
Wonderful. No, that's fine. Got to know. First of all, I want to say that I'm a little sorry that we couldn't maybe talk and maybe solve these problems beforehand, because I believe it's based on some wrong information or maybe focused on one wrong event. In general, I'm very happy to offer changes and differences to the event who could make the event much better. And I want to introduce that maybe at the end of my speech. First of all, I maybe want to mention that we have already good relationship with Ealing. We have had the same event in the year 2016 in Acton Green Common. And I must admit that it was the same representations like the police sent yesterday. We had exactly the same number and comments in 2016. We then agreed on making a resident meeting where I personally came. And after all this negative comments from residents, only 2 turned up at the end of the day. And actually at this situation, nothing happens and the event went on. We had a wonderful event, and I think that Mr. Edwards also can confirm that there has been not really anything happening at the Oktoberfest in Acton Green Common. So I think that is at least a positive start to Ealing, and that is of course also our target to bring the same thing again. Then I want to comment on this event which is mentioned, and that is the Millwall Park. First of all, I please want you to note that Millwall Park is a different area of London, and it's a totally different area compared to Ealing. We had the problem which started already in 2017 in that area, and that is gangs. There had been a lot of gang problems around in this Millwall Park, and we were about the only event every year in that park. Have been there since 2012. Been working every year on an increased capacity, so everything went actually quite well until 2016, the last good year. Then in 17, this problem started with gangs and with bad people coming by. The police didn't work in a way on the gangs and on the area around the event, but rather said we need to fill in more security. So they every year just filled in more and more security. So we ended up at the end with 68 security people on a 2,000 capacity. And that was really too many, because I think that could actually lead to the opposite, that people think that they are coming to a kind of event which I don't want to have. We had then a hearing in 2019, and in this hearing, the police wanted us to get the license revoked. But the councillors in the meeting was convinced together with me that we can change the event and make it better again in the future. So they granted my license, and in 2021 I actually had an application in for the event, which also was accepted by the council. But at the end of the day, with all this COVID and the situation like it was, I decided that I wanted to withdraw that. So don't make the event in Milvold Park this year. So I think a little now to focusing just on this one event and saying that we bring all this mess to Ealing is not fair, because what I wanted to show you is that we have had this event in the UK since 2011, and we have been on numbers of cities, and in none of them we had any problems. We had a good time, we had guests, we had returning events, and we have no police involvement whatsoever. And that is a thing I really want to focus on and tell you that is this one-off event in Milvold Park, which I decided now for me that I never will do again, because it's also a risk for me. One night some of my staff was, let's say, taken in uphold with the gangs and so on. So they tried to steal our money and things like that. So I really said, I don't want to go to this area anymore. I don't feel safe myself. And I think when I went to Ealing, also 2016, it is such a wonderful, nice area. And this event we bring is not a bad event. It is a positive event. I always say it's a small carnival, because people dress up. Maybe you see in some comments on the from the representations, they have been looking at our homepage and saying it's a cult event. And what we mean with the cult event is that people really certainly dress up as Germans, and I must say for Britain to do that is a big thing. They come dressed up in lederhosen, in dirndls. They like the German music and the atmosphere, and that is what we want to bring to people. We want to unite, even though the Brexit, of course, is a little opposite now, but we want to unite the European thoughts, the German, the Brits, and the whole historic behind it. And I think Oktoberfest has proven to be one of the best united things, because the love to beer and good time and just a day out is a common thing between Germany and Britain. And that is the thing which I built on since 2011, and which I also think we successfully built on. And therefore, I'm very sad to see that this one event, which has external happenings, should ruin everything. On the other hand, I also want to say that we, especially in Ealing, wanted to bring a Halloween event, which is something totally different again from the normal Oktoberfest, because Halloween is actually thought to be a mixture of the original Halloween and the Oktoberfest dress up. So we have a full dress up, everybody nearly coming to the event in Ealing. And you also see that we have a family Sunday where we have really a lot of families coming from Ealing and Richmond and the area around here. So that is the event which is very popular among families. So it's not just all about drinking and being a bad time like the police think. So I really hope that I can show you and tell you that is not the fact what we want to bring. And maybe to end my comments, I also want to show this and want to suggest you that we halve the capacity, so that we will go down from 3,000 expected to only 1,500. And this is actually only expected to be reached on the Saturday. So I think by this we can also ease the concerns by many of the residents and the police, maybe, because I think a number of 1,500 is not a special big number to have. Anyhow, people come during the day and they leave in the evening. We will also stop the music already at 10:30 instead of 11. Also to ease the concerns from the residents. So I'm very happy to work on this together with you, that we can show that it's not a bad event. And I'm very happy if you really think after the event also not to come back, but I'm quite sure when we have delivered this, I just had it last week in Manchester, we had 2,000 guests, no police, nothing at all. So I'm quite sure that we can deliver the same thing in Ealing. And this weekend we are in Edinburgh, just to tell you that's where I am at the moment. We opened this day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rowan. Just have you bought, and there's no one in the room, so I pretty much know your answer, but you bought have you any witnesses to support your application with you?
I don't have no, because I'm not from here, so I'm in a way, I see, I myself, I try to sort this the best way.
Yeah, that's fine. Just yeah, because I know it's, we would normally know, but I just wanted to clarify that. So we're going to invite the responsible authorities, which in this case are the police team and their counsel, to ask questions of to you, Mr. Round. Thank you very much for your initial speak.
Thank you.
Mr. McComb, do you have questions?
Chair, I don't have any specific questions from my part at this stage, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if Sergeant Edwards or PC Smart do.
Not at this stage, thank you. I think they might come out during the during your representation.
No, not at this stage, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, questions to Mr. Round?
Chair,
Not as chair.
Chair, I have questions about the running of the event for Mr. Round.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Now is a good time.
I obviously the council chose not to ask, but I'm sure they'll follow up later. But yes, please go ahead.
Okay. So, Mr. Round, Julie Glenn, Councillor Julie Glenn, I represent Ealing Broadway ward in Ealing Council. So I've got 4 questions actually. The first one is, and they're all mentioned in the various documents that I've seen. Litter picking obviously is one of the issues, and seek reassurance that is actually something that is well taken care of. You've talked about Millwall. You've spoken very frankly about what happened there. I don't think anyone would be naive enough to think that there are not gangs everywhere in London. There may be different areas, but are there lessons that you learned in Millwall that you would bring to the Ealing platform? You've mentioned it's a Halloween event. Some of us who live in houses with windows have still got egg stains on those windows from Halloween trick or treats. So there's obviously an increased, there are projectiles thrown at Halloween events. I want to know about measures to actually stop that and prevent that happening in a crowded area. And the final thing, you mentioned that food is on sale at the event. Now, I have organised many events myself in the past, large events, and I know that food is a very good way to stop people getting drunk. And the problem, though, is that food is available, but there are vast queues because food takes time to prepare. And how would you counter that problem of the queuing up, people not eating, and therefore a risk of drunkenness and public disorder, which is the key complaint and the key issue that everyone has with this event?
Can I just unpack one of those questions, Mr. Councillor Gallant? Very sorry to hear about his house being egged. But yeah, I think what sort of security measures are in place going in and out of the venue? We all know Walpole Park, and we all know the festival set up where there's security. So could you just perhaps explain that? I think that might actually help Mr. Councillor Gallant's questions.
Yes, I will build that in. Maybe I just start from the litter picking. Of course, we will have waste bins and everything outside and try to also to get people to dispose it. At the end of the day, it's not allowed to bring any food and drinks to the event. So therefore, we also not expecting people really to bring a lot of waste. But we have a team going through the area in the morning and also after the event to do litter picking on the way out. So we will make sure of that at least. That should not be any problem. The second question was if I learned some lessons, and I must say I did, of course, because we try to attract a crowd which is different now since we had this happenings in Ealing, in Millwall Park, and especially in Ealing. I think it is very good because we want to attract people between 25 and 70. We are just not looking at all at young people because, first of all, they are also not that much interested in our style because we have the Ompa music and the different styles. So it's rather, let me call it, grown-up people who is interested, like you and I, in coming. And we have a lot of companies also coming there. We have even people with 70, 80-year-old, which has been in München, in Munich for 20, 30 years, and they want to see it once more. So I think we have a very broad number of audience, and that's also what we try with our marketing to focus on. We had maybe in Melbourne Park focused too much on younger people. So we changed that absolutely, because that is not the area we want to be in. Halloween itself, we had it some years. Last year we were, 2019, sorry, we were in Kensington in Olympia with the Halloween event. And I can assure you I didn't see any eggs, so I don't think that will be a problem here. People come also dressed up. It's rather the idea with the dressing up. It's not about the things outside the event itself. So I don't see that should be a problem. And the very good question from you with the food is actually we have invented a special German bratwurst hot dog, which is sold inside the tent, very easy to access. So like a hot dog shop, you don't need to wait for that. You can access it from different areas, and there's a lot of stuff inside. And actually, one of my proposals also for today was that I change out the sell of tickets now. So we only sell with this hot dog, which is a lot of bread, and that is very good for absorbing later on when you've been drinking a beer. So my suggestion was also that to make that a condition, that we now only sell tickets for the Saturday with food, and then we can make sure that people eat something. So I would think from that point of view, I hope that is answer to your questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rao. It may be in my pack, but if it is, it doesn't stand out. There doesn't appear to be any references to the ABVs that you're serving. Could you confirm how the beer is bought and sold, in what quantities, what minimum? If you buy so much, do you get an extra,
Yes, of course. We bring a tank of beer from Germany, so it's special beer, because I also saw that is actually an attraction itself, because we here in the UK, I think it's very few brands you can buy. So it's something different. It's a small brewery brewing the beer, and the ABV is 4.8%. So it's a bit stronger than the beer you buy normally, like a Foster's with 4%. But it's still not the strong beer which you, for example, in Munich, they even sell 6% beer, and that is really too strong because people get not too good with this strong beer. So 4.8%, it's a relatively okay level. It's still stronger beer than the British one, but it's not that bad. We have different sizes. There's of course no discount on any alcohol with us, so you cannot buy like a 2 get 1 free or something. It will always be a full price, and we take a high price to maybe drop also the consumption, because we take £12 for a 2-pinter. This is the Stein, the famous Stein. That is also the biggest one we have, of course. We have a 1.5 pint for £9, and then we have a half pint for £3.
Okay.
So that's these 3 measures.
So just repeat. So it's 4.8, which we understand. So it's £3 for a half
Pint.
imperial pint.
Yeah.
And how much for a pint?
So we don't have the pint in
Yeah. It's a big. Yeah.
So it's 1.5 pint, and that's 9.
9. Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, that's useful. And like a hot dog, a large hot dog in a bun with relishes would be how much?
Yeah, that's £6.
£6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's then we have such tickets, which is the most famous or not popular tickets. They are like selling this 1.5 pint and a hot dog together, and they are called the Bavarian ticket, and that's actually what people like to buy the most, and they are then around £20 to buy them.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Okay, so really no further questions. The police, if you'd like to make your representations now. Mr. McComb.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, there are 3 key themes that I'd like to cover. And then, of course, Sergeant Edwards and PC Smart are here to be of as much assistance to the committee as possible in answering questions from their particular policing perspective. The three key themes that I'd like to cover briefly, which I hope will be of assistance, are as follows. The first, I just want to touch upon the key legal provisions here. While I'm aware that the committee will be very familiar with this area, and I wouldn't normally touch upon the legal provisions, I think given that this is a particular procedural context within licensing that doesn't arise particularly frequently, that is to say applications to vary and applications to transfer, it may be of assistance for me to make just a number of very short points on that front. Then secondly, I want to turn to the relevant background, which Mr. Rowan has already touched on, and I hope I'm pronouncing his surname correctly, both in relation to the Acton event, which he referred to in 2016, and then the 2019 Millwall Park event. And then finally, as I already mentioned in emails yesterday, I'll touch upon the evidence that we seek to rely on and are grateful that the committee have allowed us to rely on in relation to the exceptional circumstances regarding Walpole Park and the statements that have been received from residents expressing their concerns. So turning to the first of those themes, the key legal provisions. As I've mentioned, these are applications under sections 37 and 42 of the 2003 Act. One is an application to vary a license to specify an individual as premises supervisor, and the second under section 42 is an application for transfer of the premises license. Now, the committee will be aware that both of those provisions provide the police with an opportunity of objecting to either of those applications, and the basis for objecting in those provisions, for your note, it's section 37 subsection 5 and section 42 subsection 6, is whether there are exceptional circumstances that would undermine the crime prevention objective were the application to be granted. And in the determination of those applications, while the police objection must be based on the exceptional circumstances, from the committee's perspective, they may reject the application merely if it seems appropriate to do so for the promotion of the crime prevention objective. And that is the key test that we're concerned with here, both in relation to both applications. And again, for your note, which and I'm sure your legal advisor will go through this with you, it's sections 39, subsection 3B and section 42, 5B. Those are, that's all I propose to say at the minute, the legal context. But of course, in presenting the exceptional circumstances that have led to our objection here, it's important to point out the relevant background. Firstly, as Mr. Rowan has highlighted, there has been a previous Oktoberfest run in the borough, and that was in Acton in 2016. Now, there are a few important points to note. Firstly, the MPS doesn't object to this event, this Oktoberfest event taking place in Acton, and that needs to be emphasised. So our objection is not to the Oktoberfest event in principle on a broader level. It is simply to it taking place in Walpole Park for reasons which I will explore later. We have presented, as I understand it, the MPS has communicated this, that they would be happy for it to take place in Acton this year. But as I understand it, that has not been accepted or has been rejected by Mr. Ron. And it's important to highlight that from the outset, that this is a specific objection relating to the exceptional circumstances of Walpole, not a broader objection to the event. Turning then to the Oktoberfest in 2019 in Millwall Park, members of the committee, Mr. Rowan has introduced this topic, and it is important to draw out a number of themes. As I understand it, the event was held for 2 4-day periods in October 2019, and as a result of a number of incidents which took place during the event, the MPS applied for a review of the licensed premises. And I understand that the committee has the review application and the subsequent decision in front of it. I simply just want to touch upon a few themes that are mentioned in those documents. The first is to note the content of the application that was made by PC Perry, who refers to a number of incidents recorded in security logs. Those are summarized as follows, in that there were 28 incidents of beer being thrown, 21 incidents of fighting and aggressive behavior, 7 code red, amber, and white incidents, then 19 involving tables collapsing or people on tables, 65 reports of intoxicated people, the police or ambulance being called 6 times, 7 incidents of urination, 12 reports of injuries, and 2 offences being jumped. In addition, the application mentions that there were no records of refusals being kept, and a particularly concerning incidents are then described. One involves a fight between a group of men and security staff, which led to a bystander being punched and knocked unconscious. That was on the 11th of October, 2019. And then on the 4th of October, a victim who'd been at the event with his girlfriend was caught up in a brawl in a tent. And outside the tent, he suffered serious bodily harm, which consisted of a fractured jaw, which, as I understand it, resulted in surgery. And after inquiries were made by the police at that time, it became apparent that the Oktoberfest management team were unaware of these incidents. And you'll also see in that application, there's a report from a licensing officer who conducted an inspection and again picked up similar themes in relation to excessive drinking, no records of refusals, and perhaps the most concerning incident that the licensing officer recalls is seeing a woman in a very vulnerable state, highly intoxicated, unable to stand and leaning up against the lamppost just outside the event, as I understand it. And the committee will also note that there were transport-related problems as a result of the incident reported by both TfL and DLR. Now, the decision which the committee made is important to note, members of the committee, particularly because I think Mr. Rowan was presenting it as a victory, or that the committee were in agreement with him, the Tower Hamlets subcommittee. And I think that does require some qualification, because the committee did note that there were serious concerns here in relation to crime and disorder, and as a result of that, they sought it fit to impose additional conditions on the licence. And while they did note, and in fairness to Mr. Rowan, they noted that he was willing to engage with them, I think presenting the outcome as a unequivocal victory requires qualification, particularly given that the committee did see fit to impose what we say is a fairly robust package of conditions to mitigate the risk of the event in Millwall Park. The committee will see the conditions, and this is important, we say the conditions that were imposed, and some of them were specific to the event, including only Bavarian music being played, restrictions on standing on benches, and particularly robust package in relation to incident logs, logs of refusals and CCTV. And in particular, condition 10 was a robust condition in relation to incident logs recording a list of specified incidents, and then a number of conditions relating to refusal logs and the point at which steins of beer the sale of steins had to cease. This is important, we say, members of the committee, because of course, when Mr. Rowan was addressing the event moments ago, he mentioned gang-related activity. There are, we say, a few points to note about that. Firstly, on the face of it, from the application and from the decision which the subcommittee in Tower Hamlets raised, there doesn't seem to be any express mention of gang-related activity. Rather, the focus does seem to be on alcohol-related crime and disorder and some management failures on the part of Oktoberfest. So we would say that it's important to consider that decision within its context. And the committee may wish to consider whether blaming this solely or partly on gang-related activity is an attempt to not fully take responsibility for the failings that were evident, which drove the subcommittee in Tower Hamlets to impose the conditions that they thought were necessary. And I think it's important to point that, to make that point. Pausing there, before turning to the specific evidence in relation to Walpole, I think it's important, members of the committee, to note the difference between the process under an application to vary and transfer under sections 37 and sections 42 and an application for a new license under section 17. The committee will be aware that I raised this or flagged this point up yesterday, and I think it's important to develop it briefly now before turning to the Walpole Park evidence. The committee may wish to consider whether this application has been properly brought under sections 37 and 42 rather than under section 17 for the following reason. And of course, the committee will know that a shadow license could have been granted as an alternative, or could have been applied for and then subsequently granted as an alternative mechanism to provide for this event. We say that the nature and the usage of the premises should be something that the committee considers when they're determining whether this application has been properly brought under these sections. Now, what do we mean by that? What we mean is that when we look at the conditions that were imposed by the subcommittee of Tower Hamlets in relation to mitigating the risk of the Oktoberfest in Millwall Park, they do seem to be different in a number of material ways to the general conditions that currently exist on the local authority's licence in respect of Walpole Park. The committee may wish to consider whether this is because the licence that currently exists on Walpole Park in respect to the local authority is not geared towards events of this scope, nature, or kind. And if that's right, it may be that the committee wishes to consider whether these activities fall outside the scope of the local authority licence and whether, in fact, a Section 17 application should have been made. Further, had a Section 17 application been made, it's important to note the following. Firstly, the committee would have been able to consider whether further conditions ought to have been added to mitigate the risk of the event and perhaps mirroring the conditions which the Tower Hamlets subcommittee felt necessary to impose to mitigate the risk of crime and disorder. As I understand it, under an application in relation to section 37 and section 42 to vary and transfer, there is no power to review or impose additional conditions. That is something the committee may wish to bear in mind, and we say that's important. Secondly, had a Section 17 application been made, the residents would have been able to play a key role in that process. It would have been longer, there would have been consultation, and secondly, and importantly, they would have been able to play a role in this hearing, and they would have been able to make representations themselves, both in writing and orally. Thirdly, and finally, had a Section 17 application been made, more documentation in detail would have been provided or would have been required to be provided by the applicant as to the specific logistics of the event, as the committee will know, having dealt with many Section 17 applications. And in particular, we would have seen a full operating schedule with specific detail as to security arrangements, and to our knowledge, no such documentation has been provided at the minute in relation to this particular event. So with those points in mind, the committee may wish to consider whether this application can properly be dealt with under sections 37 and 42, and whether, given the differing nature of this event as compared to events that would be conducted by the local authority under their current license, whether a shadow license should have been applied for and whether that would have been the appropriate process. Turning finally, members of the committee, to the exceptional circumstances. And we again are grateful that the committee has considered this evidence. And we say, as a consequence of the procedural context, which I've just explained, this is important because had this been made under Section 17, the residents would have been able to speak for themselves at the hearing and formally submit representations. But of course, in this procedural context, we have had to gather those statements, and then in assessing the level of objection and concerns that the community raised, felt it necessary to make our own objection due to exceptional circumstances in this case. The committee, and I think Mr. Rowan, will have seen the statements that you've received, and to a large extent they speak for themselves, and I don't propose to go through them individually. I just hope to highlight the following features. Firstly, many of the statements are from chairs of local residents associations, including West Ealing Neighbours Group, Walpole Residents Association, Sherwood Close Residents Association, Kingsdown and Ealing Dean Residents Associations, and then the Walpole Police Panel. And it may be, members of the committee, that while individual statements have been received, if members of the community are speaking in their capacity as chairs of local residents associations, it can be taken that they are speaking for larger groups of people who share these concerns. And there are common themes running through these statements. First is the small and residential nature of Walpole Park. And as I understand it, and members of the committee, of course, will be more familiar with the intricacies of Ealing than I am, as I understand that it's different in nature to Acton Green Common. In particular, the proximity of houses to all sides of the park in Walpole is something that makes it stand out and is particular to that area. And as I understand it, some gardens even run into the back of the park. Secondly, a key theme that was running through the statements, which again, I think Sergeant Edwards and PC Smart may be able to give their own perspectives on, are pre-existing problems with antisocial behaviour in the area. And that is teased out in a number of the statements in relation to both alcohol and drugs. And while it seems the statements agree that this has been managed by local police, the residents seem to fear that an event of this scale and size and nature may exacerbate those issues, undermining the crime prevention objective. And finally, the residents themselves, in addition to the legal points I've raised about the nature of this process, stress that they feel that this has been a rush and the mechanics haven't been in place to properly cater for their views. And had there been more consultation, and I suppose had there been a Section 17 application, there may have been more formal engagement with them, and it may have been that open dialogue could have been created, which would have led to perhaps agreed or more robust conditions. But again, given the procedural context we find ourselves in, it doesn't appear that the committee has the power to impose those additional conditions. So those are the key themes that I wish to tease out under those three headings for the committee. And I'll pause there, Chair, and await any questions to myself and PC Smart and Sergeant Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. McComb. That's very useful. Just bear in mind, anybody who's not speaking, if they can mute their mic. I think Mr. Round may not have his microphone muted at the moment. However, you'll have an opportunity to speak, ma'am. Obviously, by way of reply to some of those points, do you have questions, Mr. Round, to Mr. McComb on the nature of his?
Yes, please. First of all, I would like to ask, because I heard the first time that we could have the possibility to move the event to Acton Green. Nobody has told me that or asked for that, because that would, of course, if that could solve the whole situation, we could be happy doing this. I think also that it should be more focused on this event, which has been in Ealing and is a total different place of London than always focusing on this Mill Park. As I mentioned, I mean, for example, this fight you said on the 11th with the security, that was exactly this gang. They turned up 50 people and fighted our security. So just to mention that. But I have never heard this Acton Green, and I mean, that could maybe be a solution. I'm very happy to open that. And I just also want to mention that actually we have a full event management plan of 113 pages handed in for this event, with security, with production scales, with everything on. And we actually also started this process in spring 2020, because it was supposed to be in the autumn of 20, this event in Ealing, but due to the COVID, we had to postpone it a year. So it has been really in progress already for a long time. So I'm a little sorry to hear that you think we just like try to sneak it in. That's not the fact, actually.
Okay. Just bear with me. You just hold on to that point, Mr. McComb. Okay, go ahead, Mr. McComb. Sorry. Yeah. I'm not sure what you were asked there, but do your best, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I was simply going to comment on the Acton Green offer, and I think Sergeant Edwards may also be able to help on this point. As I understand it, there has been communication with the borough events team, and it was our understanding that we had made it clear, following I think previous correspondence with Mr. Round, that no objection was made in relation to Acton Green Common. Perhaps Sergeant Edwards, you could add some your communication here.
Mr. Reddy, yes, right. I'm just conscious I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of an applicant that hasn't been made. But go ahead, Mr. Edwards, Sergeant Edwards.
It's just to reinforce that issue. The offer of Acton Green was communicated. So for whatever reason, I believe that it was refused. So
by who? By Mr. Rounds and staff.
I haven't had any communication, Mr. Wright, although we have exchanged email communication in very brief in the early days of the process, in which we haven't discussed locations, but I purely dealt with the events umbrella team, LBE events.
But that would have come to the local authority that
Absolutely,
an offer, and you wouldn't have made the offer. You would just have sat outside with the police scope, wouldn't you?
Well, it was made clear that we wouldn't object. So for whatever reason, that there's no mudslinging here. It just the communication was there.
Okay, well, could be helpful to me. Why would you have no objections to Acton Green and you have objections to Walpole? What's the material difference?
Well, I think really Mr. McComb has summed it up perfectly. And I think it's really, this size of event is just not, in our opinion, the right location for a sort of a large, noisy, sort of alcohol-fueled event. If you take Walpole Park, it's a densely populated area. It's a relatively small, family-orientated park, and it's within a conservation area. Again, Mr. McComb covered this. It's surrounded by residents. It's a sort of safe, peaceful, non-commercial area. In addition to that, you've got adjacent Dean's Gardens, which residents and local authority, police will all know has a long history of alcohol-related ASB, and the residents have had to endure the problems with that for many years. So if you take the potential or the risk of sort of maybe 3,000 people being almost released into this residential area, not just the problems at the event, but the surrounding area with the risk of the ASB associated with it, urination and damage to property. And the police and the LBE and the local community have worked hard over the years to make Walpole Park this safe, I would say, a safe place, especially during these times we live in. And the event we're looking at here, the primary focus of it, I think we need to get back to is to be honest, is to consume alcohol. And to answer your question, to bring it back, what's the difference? The location of Walpole Park, or indeed Acton Green Common, for instance, Gunnersbury Park, are very different. And it's just not, we would say, it's just not suitable for this large scale event.
And Councillor Kelly,
so just make a point, and I do understand. However, we've had jazz festivals, blues festivals, comedy festivals for over a generation where there has been in Walpole Park.
But if I may come in, the nature, and we appreciate that, but the events we're talking here are very different to a jazz festival, even the Ealing Real Ale Festival. They're very different. I don't think you can draw parallels between the two.
And there's never been an Oktoberfest has there been a festival held in October in Walpole Park?
To my knowledge, no, but I've been here a while. I don't go back.
Yeah.
But of course, you remember, committee and the residents may remember that the original application we were dealing with Mr. Arbor before was originally applied for in Haven Green, which again is a small, densely populated, of those who are not aware of it, area, which we objected at that point. The Oktoberfest that went ahead at Acton Green Common was a result of a police objection to Haven Green, and that was the result of why it went there. So we would say this is a similar situation. It's the location that we're concerned with, and of course we want to protect. We want to protect and support local residents. Public safety is paramount.
Councillor Kelly, could I just supplement, just to hopefully be of assistance to those two questions that you asked, just very briefly in relation to the second one. So the nature of the other events that have been held in Walpole Park. I suppose one might consider that the culture surrounding Oktoberfest is different, and there's a drinking culture that may be associated with it that is not necessarily associated or prominent at, say, jazz festivals and the other kind of incidents you mentioned. Even I think the craft beer festival, which take place again, wouldn't have necessarily this, or doesn't have the same culture that I think has been described in relation to Oktoberfest. I think, as to your first question, Councillor Kelly, in relation to what makes Walpole different to, say, Acton, in addition to the perspective that Sergeant Edwards has just given, I think it's again important to remember the context of the police within these particular applications. So without a consultation process where the residents can express their own views, obviously the police has a duty, if there are exceptional circumstances, to object in relation to the crime prevention objective. And it does seem, as we move throughout October, the number and strength of feeling of the concerns of local residents increased, all saying the same things. And as I understand it, there haven't been any concerns that are broader beyond the Walpole community. And it doesn't seem that there are community-based concerns in relation to Acton. And I think, again, that is a point. And it's, again, the reason the police brought the objection is to ensure that the strength of feeling from a number of residents groups and associations in relation to the potential for crime and disorder caused by this event were aired. So I think, given the strength of feeling in the community relates specifically to Walpole Park and not the broader borough, is again a point to bear in mind, we say.
Okay. Councillor, my apologies. I perhaps I'll give you an opportunity to come in, but this is Mr. Round's opportunity to ask questions, and I will bring you in, Councillor Gallant, I promise. Mr. Round, have you any questions to the council? Please, council.
Yes, I think maybe because if I listen right to your comments that you are afraid of 3,000 people dispersing the event, but would it not be a solution then to have this capacity to only allow 1,500 people at one time? And I mean, anyhow, a dispersal of people will take over an hour, so that is not like just in once that they go. Maybe that could ease some concerns. I think we can even make the whole thing smaller, also the tent then, to make it only 1,500 capacity.
Yeah, but we can't make those conditions now, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Hattie, is that correct? Hattie, I mean, I know Mr. Round, he's making suggestions, but I'm not sure we can.
Chair, I concur with the advice that's been given by also the submissions that have been made by Mr. McComb.
Okay, which no, fine, right. Thank you. So we can't really consider that, Mr. Round. Anything
okay, I
else?
just thought it could be an internal agreement then, maybe, you know. So
yeah. Any other questions?
No, thanks.
That's fine. Yeah. Councillor Gallant, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. That was my question. There was a confusion between the numbers there. That's been answered now. Thanks very much.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Councillor Cordier, did you have any questions to council from the police?
Chair, I was going to raise a question about the, as Mr. Round said, the alcohol ABV is 4.8%, not more than that. they provide. Even then, I think the gathering in Walpole Park would be a huge gathering. I think we heard from Mr. McComb their concerns, and basically, I apart from that, I don't have any particular questions you have raised earlier on.
I just think it's fair. I'll make a comment on the APV and
Yeah.
Dean's. This is just a general observation, and we can discuss it more when we're considering.
Yeah.
You can buy a 440. Well, you can buy half a litre can of beer, strength of 7%, along the Uxbridge Road, for £1.25. And but what's being offered here, to put it into context, is half a pint for £3. So it will cost a lot more to get drunk in Walpole Park at an Oktoberfest, if it was granted, than it would be to walk down the road, buy a can of beer and drink it in Dean's Gardens, which is what people have been doing for generations. So yeah, but that's what we're here for. We're here to flesh these things out.
That's right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody would disagree with those statements. Okay, so given that we don't have any other questions, I would invite parties to sum up. So how it goes, Mr. Rawn, is that council will sum up on behalf of the police, and as you're the applicants, you'll have right to reply to those comments and to sum up last. So council will go, and then you'll go. So council.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I don't propose to sum up. You have my comments and follow-up and the follow-up questions and answers that were provided by Sergeant Edwards. So I don't propose to sum up. I think hopefully the comments I've made are still fresh in your.
Yeah, I mean, I have a procedure which you asked for, and
yes.
Procedure dictator, I have to give that.
Yes, and I'm grateful that you did provide that to us.
And I've got no indications from anybody else in your team. So Mr. Rown, bearing in mind this would be your last opportunity, try and consider all the points that have been made to you in your application.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you also very much. First of all, I'm very happy to be flexible, and even though if it would be moving the event to Acton Green, but at the other hand, I will just promise that I will keep the capacity at 1,500 anyhow, despite your decision, if we may come. Also to show the residents that they should not fear us and that we are a good event. We will also stop the music half an hour earlier than proposed, so that by 22:30 all noise will be silent from our side. And I'm also very happy to implement the food element. We talked about that all tickets we sell from now on also only will be with food. So I hope that you can see and that you have the feeling we have done this for many, many years, and our intention is to stay for many years. In Munich, the festival has been on for 210 years. That's also my intention. We will not see that then, but at least I hope we can continue. So I hope you give us a chance to show that.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. You've been very helpful. So, Hattie, before we retire, can I just confirm there's nothing outstanding procedurally?
No, I don't believe so, Chair. I think you've covered everything. We've taken on board.
So the procedure now is that you'll be exited from the room, shown the door from the room, we will deliberate. The time check is 11:35. I'm confident that we will have a decision and be able to come back to you at 12:30. So if you want to sort of come back to the room, you'll be allowed in just before 12:30. However, we do as a panel sort of reserve the right to take longer should we need to. So thank you very much, and I may see you all at 12:30. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.